going around Facebook, and I wanted to repost it, but I was afraid that I would have too many people that would then have theological arguments with me about it. So I decided to just tell you in my sermon, because then no one can argue back with me. But the funny thing was that it said, what if it had been women who had gone to the stable instead of wise men, but wise women? Well, how would it have been different? And so it said, well, first of all, they would have arrived on time. They'd have helped deliver the baby. They would have cleaned the stable, made a casserole, and brought practical gifts. It's easy to kind of look at the whole wise men, Magi story, and it has a sense of curiosity to it. It has a sense of, not exactly, what is going on here. And we have, if we had a chance, how would we have journeyed? Would we have journeyed a little bit different than the Magi? How would we have responded when we looked into the sky and saw the stars? Would we have even made the journey that changed the world? The journey to Bethlehem, the journey with the Magi. And so this morning we're going to consider a couple things that the Magi did that maybe we need to do in our journey with Christ. Will you pray with me, please? Dear God, I just ask you that you just open our hearts and open our minds and open my mouth to speak a word that brings glory and honor to you. Amen. So the journey to Bethlehem came at a cost to the Magi. The journey began with a spirit of openness, and you can't find anything unless you're first looking for it. In our family, we often talk about people, you are a good looker or a bad looker. Now, how many people in this place are good lookers? Good lookers? Oh, Stephen, you're not a good looker. I always say you might look good, but you're not a good looker. That where is, and then you walk into the room and it's right in front of their face. You can't find anything without at least putting some of your attention to it. And see, with the wise men, they were studying the stars. It was part of their practice. They were paying attention. And they were paying attention to the changes. How many people paid attention to the fact that when they came and sat here this morning, the people were sitting in different spots? It's about being aware of your presence, of what's going on around you. So I ask you this morning, how are you studying the world around you? Do you pay attention to the changes around you? Do you know what's happening around you? Especially, do you know what's happening that might not directly affect you? Maybe see that how something that's going on in the world might affect someone else, someone who might be in a different place or a different situation than we are. The Magi saw the star, and they saw that there was something different. And then they took the next step. They took a step of action. They were willing to give up everything to follow. It was a journey that they had no idea how long it might take. It was a journey that they were not sure where it would take them to. And yet, they packed up everything and they went. I ask you, when was the last time that you set out and took up something new? Took on an adventure, and took on an adventure that you did not have control of. Unfortunately, most of us hold very tight control of the world around us. Like Judy talked about the map, we want to make sure that we don't get lost. We don't want to wander. We don't want to take chances. For some of us, doing something new might be a great adventure like the one of the Magi. But for so many others, the great adventure is the fact that you get up every morning and you leave your front door. That so many people in our congregation and in our community are paralyzed with depression, and it keeps them from moving beyond their front doors each and every day. And so I challenge you, if it is something on a small scale of just getting up and getting dressed and walking out the front door each and every day to greet the world that is so unsure to you, or if it is a great adventure like the Magi, are you ready to take the risk? And then once you've taken that risk and you've begun the journey, that you have to realize that the path will not be easy. The Magi pursued a logical path. They knew that a king was going to be born and the king was to be the king of the Jews. And so what they did was they took the path that led them to the man that they knew was known as the king of the Jews. And who was that? Herod. King Herod. They went and they asked Herod for directions. Now I am convinced that that is the reason to this day men still do not ask for directions, because they made such a bad choice that time asking Herod for directions. However, they took that risk. You know, when you search for something, it matters that you should expect that on the road there are going to be problems. That is life's condition. That is why we are not in heaven already, and being on earth means that we are going to face problems, that the path is not going to be easy. But we need to give sacrificially, just as the Magi did. That they set out, and they went on a road, and they sacrificed. They sacrificed their time and their freedom and their comfort, all for a king. You know, it's hard to travel, more than 1,000 miles and then back. But can you imagine traveling across hot deserts during the day, and then they become freezing cold at night? To go through rivers, to go through mountains, all to get to the place where you believe something might happen. And they went through all of these regions in a sacrificial way, because they knew that on the journey they might face problems. And when the journey gets difficult, you know, the first thing that I think of when I hit a roadblock is I'm going to turn around and go back home. Anybody else with me? Yeah. Like, okay, this is just not worth it. This is not my day. Let's go around. Now, anyone who has ever driven with me, I know that Jill and Angie could attest to this, because I'm a turner arounder. And so I am always getting lost, and I'm always turning around and turning around and turning around and going in a new direction. And you know, I think that that's what we need to do in life, is sometimes we need to be willing to just keep turning around and moving in a new direction. But if we have a goal in mind, so it isn't going in circles. I have a goal. I have a place I am eventually going to get to. However, sometimes the trip is long. And sometimes we make bad stops, just like they did. But you know what? Herod did not dissuade them. They continued on until they met the king. And so I challenge you that if you have started the journey, that if you have taken the risk, if you have made the sacrifice, but you feel like it is just going on and on forever, that you just continue with faith. You know, I was thinking about the Imagine No Malaria. 5 years ago, just out of a sermon, preached about the children of Africa dying every 30 seconds from malaria. This congregation decided that they were going to support Imagine No Malaria. Actually, it even had a different name back then. It was Nothing But Nets. We decided that we were going to take two causes, the cause of those who needed to make a living with fair trade and those who needed to have their lives changed by medicine that was available for no malaria. We decided to take that journey. And in 5 years, many, many partners have come along the road to join in. According to the World Health Organization, a report that was released in December said that the clock was set back 2 full minutes. That in the past, when we started 5 years ago, a child died every 30 seconds from malaria. But now in Africa, it is every 2 minutes. But we will not stop now, because we know that there is a possibility that just like today there are not children dying of malaria here on our continent, that it is not necessary for children to die of malaria in Africa. And so we're going to continue the fight, even though it seems like it's a long one. We will not give up the cause because we know that it matters to someone. And so when you head out on a journey, and when you face difficult times, you persist because you know it matters. And when they got there, what did they do? They worshiped. When they reached the home, they worshiped. It was their immediate response to seeing God. It was an act of worship. Passionate worships actively seek out God, and they worship God. In one way, it's because we know that worshiping God heals and transforms us in a way that nothing else can. It renews us, it gives us hope, and it shapes us. It provokes us to change, and it inspires us to compassion. And it binds us together as we worship together in a community. But more importantly, when we worship God, we show that we place all of our focus and our trust on God, despite not knowing what tomorrow will bring, and despite all the things that had happened in our yesterdays and todays. Part of their worship included that they gave generously. And there was significance to the gifts that they gave. They worshiped him and they gave him gold, because gold was for a king. They worshiped him and they gave him frankincense, because frankincense was something that was used by priests. And they worshiped him and they gave him myrrh, because myrrh was for the one who would die. It was a funeral essence and it was used in burial. And so it pointed to all the things that this special child was. A king, a priest, and one who would die for his people. But it had more significance than just the things that it symbolized. It is likely that it was because of their generosity, because these were gifts that were very, very valuable, that it allowed the Holy Family to escape to Egypt and to live there because of these gifts that they received from the kings. You know, this is an incredibly generous congregation. And I am blessed to be able to say that I have never come before you and said that there was a need, that you didn't step up to the plate, that you weren't willing to just dig deep and give in a way that was sacrificial. But I am challenging you in this new year. What would it look like if we, like the kings, could give generously to God before we even knew what the need was? To give not as a response to human suffering and need, but instead to give as an act of supreme worship. To say that money is just part of the ways that we worship our God. And by giving something that truly matters to us, because we have to be honest, money matters to us. By giving that sacrificially, how will that change the way we worship? And how would it change what happens in this congregation? And so I challenge you to give. I challenge you, would you be willing to take your gift and set it at the feet of Jesus? And then they returned home. We know that the Magi received a gift from the angel, a visit from the angels, and that the angel said to them that they were not to go home the same way, but instead that they were to go a different way. That they had come and worshiped, but in a way, it was really important that they went a different way because they weren't the same people as when they first came. The being in the presence of God had changed them. And so I wonder, do we allow coming into the presence of God change us? Do we allow ourselves to consider to go home in a different way? To be changed by our extravagant worship of God and our generous giving, our sacrifice to make it to be in front of the King? The question that comes before us this Epiphany is not necessarily what will we bring to the King, but what will we take away, knowing the cost that it took to make that journey. When the Magi saw the star rising in the sky, and when they decided to follow it, they knew that they were going to discover a king, and they chose their gifts lovingly. When they left their lands, they packed their gifts eagerly, and as they traveled, they guarded the gifts carefully. And they only had one goal: to bring their gift to the King of Kings. And so I ask you today, may Jesus grant each of you the same love, the same zeal, the same curiosity and generosity, and the same care to follow the star and to bring to Jesus yourself.